tried to kill myself when I was 7 years old. At 7, I had already been here long enough to know I didn't want to be here anymore. Kids were bullying each other at school. People were horrible to each other, and everyone seemed cruel to animals. And there was suffering everywhere. Well, at 7 years old, I had absolutely no idea how to take my own life. So after several failed attempts, I ran out to the garden to cry. And it was a hummingbird that saved me and rescued me. This little hummingbird flew within inches of my face. It must have been about 3 minutes, but it felt like forever. And I'll never forget his shimmering red, fiery orange, and cobalt blue, his thumbing wings and his little tucked legs, and his black beady eyes looked into mine. And while he was hovering there, a feeling of peace came over me, like it was going to be okay, that I was needed. He was beckoning me to stay, and he saved my life. That's when my love affair with animals began, and my obsession with them started. And I had to be out in nature with animals in every spare moment. And I spent all my spare time in the lakes watching tadpoles turn to frogs, or in the woods watching little bunny rabbits hop around, and overturning logs to find salamanders of every amazing color. And to me, nature was this magical kingdom full of mythical, magical creatures, and I could not get enough. Well, as I got a little older, I started noticing that sometimes animals need help. Sometimes they fall out of their nests, or they get lost or injured. So on my adventures, when I would find an animal that needed help, I would bring them home. And by the time I was 7 years old, my little plan was to have a house full of animals that I saved, and they would be my friends. Sadly, my parents were not amused. They did not want a house full of animals. And so they would get rid of them when I was at school, and I'd come home to find them gone, which was awful. And I would cry, saying, "How can you do this to me?" And they'd say, "Ellie, when you grow up, you can have as many animals as you want." So I now have 200 animals. Thank you. But I would yell at my poor parents when I was 7 years old. I would say, "You'll see, when I grow up, I'll have a huge place full of animals, and I'll show the world how beautiful they are." And I don't know where this idea came from, but every time I yelled it at my poor parents, I would think to myself, "That's a really good idea. You really have to do that." And so I got more and more obsessed with this idea the more I would yell it at my parents, until it was all I could think about. And so I would sit in school and I would doodle animals on my notebook, on my desk, and my arms until everything was covered in animals. And I would go to sleep at night picturing the pigs I would give tummy rubs to, and the chickens I would hold, and the cows I would hug, until the idea was so real in my mind that I could taste it, smell it, and touch it. Well, I had no idea how to start the Gentle Barn for real. I mean, I didn't own land, and I didn't have money, and I hadn't even met a farm animal at that point. But I would tell everyone that would listen what my plans were, and they all thought I was crazy. Well, it wasn't until well over 20 years later, as a young adult, living in a small house with a half-acre backyard, running an errand, I saw a petting zoo I'd never seen before. And it was full of animals, and it was full of people, and there was a very peculiar smell wafting into the windows. And I found myself pulling over and walking into that place just to be nosy and see what was going on there. And what I found there absolutely broke my heart. They were beating the ponies to keep going round and round in circles, carrying kids that were too big to be on them in the first place. There were dead animals in cages. All the goats and sheep had grossly overgrown toenails and deformed legs. And there wasn't one drop of water on the property, even though it was well over 100 degrees. And I was absolutely sick to my stomach. But the most disturbing thing that I found at that petting zoo was not the condition of the animals. The most troubling thing at that petting zoo was that it was full of people, and not one of them, beside me, could see the suffering right in front of them. They were too busy holding hands and skipping around, posing their kids, smiling next to these broken animals. And no one could see the suffering, and it baffled me. So I had to run out of there as fast as I could. And running for the door, blocking the exit, was a very old goat that looked like she was about to drop dead any second. But she looked me in the eyes, she stopped me in my tracks, and she asked me for help. So I said, I guess I could bring a goat home. And went to find the owner and said, hey, can I have that goat? Thinking I was doing her a favor. And she said, no. And I said, well, can I buy her? Name your price. And she said, no, leave me alone. And I said, that goat is going to die if I don't help her. I'm going to stay here till you say yes. And I stayed there for 12 days. On the 13th day, she came and found me and said, take the goat and get the heck out of here. So I brought Mary the goat home. And I found a mobile vet in the Yellow Pages that came out and trimmed her overgrown toenails and removed her horrible tumors and taught me how to massage her deformed legs so she could walk again, and taught me how to care for her. And a few months later, she was bouncing around the backyard as happy as can be. And it was the greatest feeling I had ever had in my life. This is what I was born to do. This is my purpose. This is who I am, and I needed more of it. Rescuing animals and breathing the life back into them became a drug that I had to have more of. Well, meanwhile, I had been calling authorities on that place to see if they could help the other animals that were there, and they all said the same thing. They all said, we know, she's connected politically, there's nothing we can do, walk away. Well, apparently walking away is not in my nature. So I thought, well, if the authorities aren't going to help the animals there, then I have to do more. So I went back to the petting zoo. She was not happy to see me coming. But I showed her a picture of Mary. I told her all the things that I did for her. And I said, look, I know that you have other animals that need help. No questions asked. I will take them off your hands. And she rolled her eyes and seemed very annoyed at me. But nonetheless, she said, fine, wait right here. And she went in the back and she started dragging animals out of the back. Broken bones, pneumonia, scared to death, dying. And I took the whole pile home. There were chickens, sheep, goats, pigs. I took them all home. And I called the same vet, and he came out and helped me heal them one by one. And a few months later, I woke up in the morning, looked out my little window that looked out to the backyard that was now full of animals. And I said, holy cow, I just started my dream. And I called it the Gentle Barn. Well, this was 20 years ago. The Gentle Barn is now a 20-year-old national nonprofit organization with locations in Los Angeles, California, Nashville, Tennessee, and St. Louis, Missouri. And we take in animals, thank you. Thank you. We take in animals that really no one else wants and have nowhere else to go because they're too old, too sick, too lame, or too scared to be adoptable. And we bring them in, and we rehabilitate them with vet care, but we also use acupuncture, acupressure, chiropractics, deep tissue massage therapy, ultrasound, eye therapy, water therapy, energetic healing, nutritional supplements, and lots of love. Once they're finally healed and happy, if we can find them homes of their own, great. And if not, because they need ongoing care, we give them sanctuary with us for the rest of their lives. And then, when they're ready, we partner with them to heal people with the same stories of abuse and neglect, and to connect children with nature and animals to help them fall in love with them. So I've lived in a barnyard for 20 years. And my book, My Gentle Barn, every page is full of stories of animals and their rescues and all the things they've taught us about courage, trust, love, and second chances. But I want to show you now a video of a rescue that Jay and I are particularly proud of.
Dance or something?
I don't dance.
But your daughter does.
My daughter does. And for those of you that don't know, this is Jay, my husband, co-founder of the Gentle Barn. He came in as a volunteer.
I have butterflies in my stomach. I'm so excited to meet him and let him know that he's not alone and that we're going to help him. And at the same time, I'm really anxious and feeling nervous. I mean, I'm hoping that we can save him.
We were contacted by a woman just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, who had discovered a bull who had his foot severed. This bull was in a Cattle Ranch is a man who did that for a living, bought animals from the stockyard, raised them and fattened them up, and then returned them to the stockyard to make more money.
That looks like it.
I had seen other herds of cows on that property come and go. It was heartbreaking to see him because I knew that his time was ticking. And so at that point I started pleading with the owner, let me rehome that cow, let me find him a good home. Let's get him better. But you get a lot of no's and the pickings are kind of slim when it comes to where you're going to put a 500-pound cow. So I was so thankful when the gentlebarn called. So that was a happy day.
Yeah, it was amazing to meet the rancher. And I thought of him as someone that I could never relate to. And yet, God, he had such a kind face and kind eyes. And learning a little bit more about his background made me have a lot of compassion for him.
10.5 months ago, I went to the sale looking for some cows to buy. I saw this particular cow with a hurt leg. And I thought maybe that when they loaded him on the trailer that they'd slammed the door on his leg, and of course it was hurting and was swollen up, but that wasn't the case at all. He got a hay string wrapped around it very tightly and cut off all the circulation.
In the stockyard cattle ranching world, animals are looked at as products. So it's not a real surprise when you're moving very quickly like that there could be an injury or a bad situation that happens.
Y'all want to go out there where he is?
Yeah, dying to meet him.
I've got some sweet meat. He'll come right up to you.
Where he was being kept, they didn't have money for surgery or a prosthetic foot or any kind of deep care like that. And so he was left to hobble around on a pasture for 10 months.
Come on, baby. That's a good boy. He's missing his entire foot. Like, holy crap. I'm really glad we're here.
Yeah, look at him.
When he got up and walked on his foot, it broke my heart to see how much pain he was in and how innocent and sweet he is. I mean, he's just still a baby. He's only a year old.
He hobbled around on 3 legs, barely putting pressure on the leg with the foot that fell off. The ground was absolutely frozen, but with little spikes sticking up from the dirt. It was absolute torture for him.
I mean, he never put his foot down for 6 months, maybe. If I know his hip is worn out.
I don't think the majority of people are aware of exactly what these cows go through on a daily basis.
Injuries in the cattle ranching business are very high. There's definite problem when it comes to how these animals are treated during this kind of transferring. The animals are terrified. It's dangerous for the people who are handling them.
At the gentlebarn, it's very common here to see moms nursing their babies for 2 to 4 years. They stay together as big families, and they're very, very bonded. So when you take that and compare it to what Dudley went through, these cows, they're taken away from their moms at a very early age. And the roundup process when they're taken away is really horrific. I mean, if you picture a family of cows, mommies and babies, and then the ranchers go through and they separate the moms and the babies. And the moms are frantically screaming for the babies, and the babies are frantically screaming for their moms. And their cries are falling on deaf ears because they're surrounded by humans that don't see them as living, feeling beings or having any kind of empathy for them whatsoever. They see them as unintelligent animals that have no souls, if you will.
It's a sad process, knowing that every single animal, these amazing, beautiful animals that are in these places, are there at their demise.
When we buy meat and dairy, we are paying someone to brutalize these animals on our behalf. The pain, the suffering will only end when we become aware and we no longer pay people to do it.
My dad learned from his dad. It was a generation thing, and it was the wrong way. And he passed it on to me. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was angry and expressed my anger and everything and wanted to be rough with it. And I had a wake-up call. I said, I'm doing everything wrong. My dad beat everything into submission because he could. It was like that with people. It was like that with anything I dealt with. And I said, I want to be better than that. And I had a lot of apologizing to do, and a lot of soul searching, and a lot of seeking people that were doing things right. After talking to you guys, I realized that I've done something good. I've kept the cow alive, kept him from going to slaughter, and it's going to help someone else down the road. It's going to give them hope. If God hadn't sent you people to come along and help, I don't know where he would end up, because I've gone as far as I can go with him. He's healthy except for a bad foot.
This man's truck and trailer has driven probably hundreds of cows to auction in his lifetime. But on this day, that truck and trailer and that rancher drove Dudley 3 hours to a hospital to save his life.
Well, a cow has come to Rocky Top looking for a cure. We're going to explain how veterinarians at UT plan to get him stepping in the right direction.
Come on, baby.
It's very clear that he's in pain. He's having a very difficult time moving around. The tendon damage that he has on his good leg is starting to cause him a lot of problems. He's unable to shift weight to his injured leg. And so he actually is on the road to destruction right now. So we've got to get in and do something for him before he gets that far.
I was really worried about the care that Dudley was going to get. But the minute we met Dr. Anderson, my fears were completely absolved.
One of the things that we try to do to evaluate the animals for candidacy for prosthetic limb is assess their attitude and their behavior and how they interact with people and whatnot. And I can see by the way he's walking that he wants to use that leg. When he is able to set it down without pain, he will put weight on it. How low his injury is a really good thing. So, everything I've seen so far, I'm optimistic that we can really do something for you.
Wonderful.
So the next step would be to perform the amputation very delicately so that he has the best surface to be able to put pressure on without exacerbating his pain.
I remember they wheeling him off into the surgical room, and I remember feeling really anxious, like they just took my child and brought him into the surgery room. It's very risky putting cows under anesthesia. They're very sensitive, and it's really easy to lose them. God, we flew all the way to Tennessee. We rescued the cow from slaughter. We got him all the way to University of Tennessee. There's thousands of people all over the world praying for him and in this with us. And wouldn't it be such a horrific tragedy if he didn't wake up from anesthesia? So that's kind of the things that were going through my mind.
The tissues that remain in the leg are not functional for a prosthesis. The type of bones that were left in there would be about like walking on rocks in your shoes. Without revising the limb, I think that it would be a relatively poor chance that he'd be able to be fitted into a prosthesis that would give him a good quality of life. The surgery today went really well. We were very happy with what we found. The condition of the tissues and our ability to sculpt the leg so that we would give him the best chance of having a prosthesis that would give him the best quality of life. Initial period now is that he's able to recover from anesthesia, get up and move around, and start to use the temporary prosthesis that we put on him.
Jay.
When an animal comes out of anesthesia, they tend to be very groggy and they tend to be very unstable. So we have to put them into a position where they're not going to fall down and hurt themselves or get up too fast.
We're going to have to go through a lot of physical rehabilitation with him to try to build his muscle mass back up and his body mass back up.
Limping on that stump for 10 months has kind of compromised his spine and compromised the body as a whole. So now that they've addressed the actual leg through surgery, now they have to start addressing the entire body, getting it healthy and strong like a 1-year-old cow should be.
In the long term, the main things that we worry about are him getting ulcers and sores on his legs and secondary infections and things like that. And that's where the prostheticist becomes a critical member of the team, is that fitting the prosthesis to his leg such that It gives him the best support with the least likelihood of those complications occurring. Is going to be really critical.
Dudley's reaction is unpredictable. A lot of it's going to depend upon how much handling that Dudley has gotten hands-on. He could be happy, he could understand that we're trying to help him, or it could take a couple of weeks before he's ready to accept a foreign device being attached to his body. There's a tremendous amount of responsibility and time in human hours that goes into putting a leg on and taking it off multiple times every day.
UT really isn't set up for long-term care. I mean, they're a hospital. While we were looking for a place, while we were preparing to take Dudley out of the hospital, we needed to find a solution. And as usual, Jay stepped up. So he left California, he came to Tennessee, and he came here to live in a hotel by himself and basically care for Dudley. So Jay was there at the hospital first thing in the morning, put his prosthesis on, was there 2 hours later to take it off, to monitor his leg, to make sure that there were no blisters or bruises. He was Dudley's champion. And I don't think that Dudley would have made it without Jay.
The fact that the Gentle Barn has got him and has so many volunteers that are willing to help is going to be a big plus. It used to be that if a leg went, you just destroyed the animal, and that's not the case now. I've worked on many animals that are still alive and happy today because they're wearing a brace or a leg.
You're listening to the Hubert Smith Radio Show on 90.3 The Rock. We're talking with Jay and Ellie and Cheyenne from the Gentle Barn. I will just ask them to please introduce themselves. Ellie.
Thank you so much for having us. We do two things. We rescue severely abused and neglected animals that nobody else wants and give them sanctuary for the rest of their lives. When the animals are ready, the animals help us heal people with the same stories of abuse and neglect.
And we're happy to announce that we're opening a new Gentle Barn right here in Tennessee. And we're so excited to be here.
To get the 3 horses today, Worthy, Chris, and Indy. We drove for 6 hours, got them back, and got them into their stalls, and they were really happy.
I am so excited. I'm about to burst out of my skin right now because we're bringing Dudley home. We're bringing you home, Dudley. He's been cooped up in a hospital for 4 months, so he's really anxious to go outside and run.
We're going to be taking him back to the Gentle Barn, get him into his stall for the night, get him comfortable, and then in the morning we're hoping to take him out to some pasture.
For the last 4 months, he was in a stall, people coming and going, medical procedures. He couldn't run, he couldn't play, he was bored out of his mind. Animals enjoy the same things that we do. They enjoy fresh air, and they enjoy running and playing and being alive. Tall, sweet grasses he got to taste, and the purple and yellow and white flowers, the breeze on his face, he found life again.
I think when people realize that there's, it's not just a hamburger, it's an actual feeling, thinking, loving being. I mean, he's like a little baby. Dudley acts like a playful little child. I think we're starting slowly to erase the barriers. I know that's a goal for the Gentle Barn to teach people.
No matter what challenge anyone is going through, if they can keep a positive attitude and a joyful spirit, they can get through anything. And that's what Dudley has demonstrated, and that's what he has to offer to so many people.
here's a guy that's been through so much in only a short year of life. He's not had kindness. He's been in pain. He's suffered. And yet, when you meet Dudley, the first thing you're hit with is the beautiful innocence about him. And his beautiful, shining spirit is remarkable. And I think that that is the most inspiring thing about him. And I think that that's why he is going to help so many people in his lifetime, that they can be brave too, and that they can get through their stories as well. So over the last 20 years, Jay and I at the Gentle Barn have rescued thousands of animals. And they all had different stories, and they all overcame it in different timings, and they all taught us different things about our own resilience. But what every single solitary animal, whether they were a chicken, a turkey, a pig, a cow, a sheep, a goat, chicken, it doesn't matter. What every single solitary animal that's ever come through the doors of the Gentle Barn has taught us is that though we look different, we're all the same inside. And my favorite story that really illustrates this point is the story I'm about to tell you. I'd like to tell you a story about karma. So several years ago, we rescued a bunch of animals from a cruelty situation. It actually turned out that we investigated this cruelty case for 4 years, ended up shutting it down, sending the guy to jail, and the animal control brought us about 100 animals from this cruelty case. Jay spent 4 years going undercover, befriending the guy, bringing all the evidence he had to finally get it shut down. But one of the very first animals that we rescued from that cruelty situation was a cow named Karma. And she came in with a few other cows. She had fresh food, she had clean water, she had shelter, she had the company of the other cows, she passed the vet check, and yet she kept crying incessantly, over and over and over again, crying and pacing all day long. And at first I thought, well, maybe she doesn't know our intentions, maybe she's just scared of what we're going to do with her. I kept making up excuses because none of us could figure out what was wrong with her. And she kept crying incessantly. Jay and I sleep with the windows open at night so that if the animals need us, we can hear them. And that night, no one got any sleep because she cried all night long. So finally, in the very wee hours of the morning, I finally went down to the barn to once and for all figure out what she was trying to tell us. And I scanned her body to see if we missed something in the vet check, and I saw it. She was dripping milk. What does that mean? She had a baby. So I called my husband Jay and I said, she has a baby, that's why she's crying. He said, I got this. He hung up the phone with me, called the backyard butcher and said, dude, where's the baby? This is so not okay. And the guy said, I'm sorry, I had to hide the baby from you because I had already sold him. We're delivering him right now. The only reason we're still here is because our truck broke down, but as soon as we fix the truck, we're delivering the baby. I'm so sorry, you can't have the baby. Well, the minute my husband Jay heard this, he hung up the phone, hooked up the truck and trailer, and drove there as fast as he possibly could. And when he got there, they were still there fiddling with the truck. So Jay assessed the situation, went over to the backyard butcher and said, okay, this is how this is gonna work. I'm gonna fix your truck, you're gonna give me the baby. And the guy was like, what do you know that we don't know? We've been fiddling with the truck for 3 hours. And Jay said, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna fix your truck, you're gonna give me the baby. So the guy, not believing that Jay could fix the truck, shook Jay's hand and said, and agreed to that. Well, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but sometimes when a truck is parked on a hill,
it can set back on its gears and get stuck in its gears. So all Jay had to do was pull the truck 3 feet up the hill, unstick the gears, and the truck was fine. The guy was livid, but honored the handshake and handed over the baby. When Jay drove home with this baby, the minute Karma heard her baby's little voice from inside the trailer, she started screaming and trying to climb over the fence or smash her way through the fence and going bananas. Now we know from Karma's perspective how horrible the separation was for her. But can you imagine what it was like for that little baby? One minute he's with his mommy, he's nursing, he feels safe and protected, and the next minute he is tied up in the back of a pickup truck alone. So when we took the baby out of that trailer and rounded the corner, and he saw his mom again, he never thought he would see her again. He was so flooded with so much relief that he passed out at her feet. So Karma, in her grace and wisdom, went over to him, and she licked him and nudged him and made little reassuring sounds to him, and he finally found the strength to stand up. Then she gave him a complete bath till he was sopping wet. And then he went around the side to nurse, and she let out a big sigh of relief and has not made a sound since. Well, that's where we thought the story would end. Mom and baby reunited happily ever after at the gentlebarn. But 8 months later, my staff came to me at the end of a long day and said, "We're worried about Karma." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, her udders are swollen." And I said, "Oh my God, do you think she has an infection?" And they said, "No, I think she's about to have another baby." And I said, "But that's impossible. We rescued her with a tiny nursing baby. Surely they wouldn't have impregnated her that early." And they said, "Well, check her out. I have a ritual where every single night before I go to sleep, I go and I tuck the babies into bed and I make sure that everybody's okay before I go to sleep. And we tuck the pigs into bed with blankets. I count every chicken and every turkey to make sure they're safely on their roosts. We give treats to the goats and sheep, cookies to the horses and cows, and we make sure everybody's happy and healthy before we go to bed." Well, on that particular night, when I approached the cow area, Karma was at the fence looking at me as if she was waiting for me. So I came up to her and I was like, "Karma, we're worried about you. What's going on?" And she turned her body around and there was a foot sticking out of her. So I ran up to the house, I woke up my husband and kids, and I said, "Wake up or have the baby!" And we went down to the cow pasture. And when we got there, every single one of our 20 cows that we had at the time was in a perfect circle around Karma. So me and my husband and children took our place in the circle, with Karma in the middle, and we watched her labor. We watched her contract. We watched her give birth. We watched her dry him up and lick him clean. We watched him struggle to stand and figure out how to walk. We watched him learn how to nurse. This whole thing took 2 hours and not one of us moved. Once the baby had finally drunk his fill, he went off to the side to lay down and sleep off his birth. At which point, simultaneously, every single cow broke the circle and formed a single file line in front of the baby. And nobody pushed or shoved, nobody tried to be first. The matriarchs and elders took the front, and the younger, more submissive cows took the back. And once the line was completely formed, the matriarch in front went up to the baby, and she licked him, and she smelled him, and she introduced herself, and she welcomed him into the family. And when she was done, she moved off, and the second in line welcomed him, and the third in line introduced herself, and the fourth in line, and fifth in line, until every single animal in that family met the baby and welcomed him into their family. And as soon as all the cows were done doing that, me, Jay, and our kids took our turn welcoming the baby. And then we all sat down under the moonlight with smiles on our faces and watched him sleep. And we realized that we were part of something very sacred and very special that doesn't exist in the real world. In the real world, there's no such thing as family for animals. In the real world, babies are taken away from their moms the minute they're born as they both scream to each other on deaf ears. In the real world, animals fall in love and they're ripped apart without a second thought. But we, in a sanctuary at the Gentle Barn, these animals found each other, formed families, and enacted these beautiful birth rituals and life rituals that we do, that all living beings do, that we can take for granted. Every single member of that family played a part in that baby's upbringing. By the way, we named him Surprise. And every member of that family played a part in bringing him up. They all played with him when he was rambunctious. They all disciplined him when he was being naughty. They all formed the same circle around him when there was a crash on the street or a stray dog in the pasture. Now, Karma was a little itty-bitty thing. She's a miniature cow. She's tiny. Surprise grew to be well over 7 feet tall and over 3,000 pounds. He was a mountain, huge mountain of a cow. And by the time he was a year old, he had to lay down and roll upside down to nurse, and it was embarrassing. And sometimes I would go up to Karma and go, you know, he's in college, you can cut him off now. And she would look at me with her wise, sweet face, and she would say, I know, but he's my last baby, and I want to love him as long as I can. And she nursed him for 5 years. Animals love their babies just like we do. Animals celebrate birth and mourn death just like we do. Tragically, Karma outlived both her sons. She was so tiny that she has a longer life expectancy, just like smaller dogs. But because they were so enormous, by the time they were full grown, they had mobility issues, and by the time they were 10, they couldn't walk anymore. But she was there to see them off, to tell them how much she loved them, and to whisper in their ears that it was okay to go. And that same family formed a circle around her to strengthen her while she said goodbye, and to encircle her as she grieved. We are all the same, we just look different. And every single animal, whether it's a dog, a cat, a horse, a bunny rabbit, a cow, a turkey, a chicken, or an emu, they are all worthy of being rescued. Now, I'm not suggesting that you open farm sanctuaries and start bring homing cows. Even though if you did bring home cows, you would love it. But I am suggesting that we are far more powerful as individuals than we think we are. And I am suggesting that there is something that we can do right now, today, without moving, without quitting our jobs, and without investing any money, that can save all animals. When one person goes vegan, we save 200 animals a year. That's thousands of animals over the course of one lifetime. When one person goes vegan, we save 1,100 gallons of water a day. That will end this drought. When one person goes vegan, we save an acre of trees every year, which combats the deforestation that is happening right now as we speak for the animal agriculture business. And when we go vegan, we reduce our own risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol level, and dementia by 90%. Animals and the people that love them have always been in my circle. Who's in your circle? Animals have always rescued me and have always heard my cries. Who hears yours? And I've dedicated my entire life to hearing all the cries of suffering. Whose cries do you answer? Because the cries we answer today will change the world.